Have you ever stopped to think about how we form our ideas about an entire civilization? A lot of the time, it comes down to just a handful of really influential books. Today, we're going to dive into one of those giants, Basham's The Wonder That Was India, and explore how it completely rewrote the story of a subcontinent.
So let's set the stage. Before this book came along, the popular story about ancient India was, well, really incomplete and pretty negative. On one side, you had this narrative built on stereotypes. But what Basham did was present a totally different reality, a picture of a civilization bursting with incredible, lasting achievements. And that's the huge shift we're talking about here.
All right, so to really get why Basham's book was such a game changer, we first have to understand the history it was pushing back against.
You see, for a long time, the main story people in the West heard about India came from British writers during the colonial era, especially guys like James Mill and Thomas Babington Macaulay. Now, their work was super influential, but it often painted a picture that, let's just say, served a very specific colonial agenda.
And that agenda led to some really sticky misconceptions. The idea that Indian culture was just static, that it never changed, that it was backwards, with no real scientific progress, that it was just a land of superstition and political chaos. This was the historical backdrop, the skewed version of history that Basham stepped into.
And this is where our guy comes in, the man who decided to set the record straight.
So who was Basham? Well, he was a famous British historian, and more than that, he was what we call an Indologist. Now, what does that mean? It means he was a scholar who dedicated his life to studying the Indian subcontinent, its deep history, its complex languages, and its incredibly rich culture. This wasn't just a hobby for him. This was everything.
And his goal was crystal clear. He wanted to write a book that was deep enough for other scholars, but also easy enough for you or me to just pick up and read. His whole mission was to correct the narrative and show the world a balanced, detailed, and respectful picture of India's real heritage.
Okay, so what's actually in this famous book? Let's crack it open and take a look.
First off, the sheer scope of this thing is just mind-blowing. Basham didn't just focus on one king or one century. No, he starts way back with the ancient Indus Valley civilization, around 2500 BCE, and he carries that story all the way through the birth of major religions and up to the 12th century. That's nearly 4,000 years of history in one book.
And he didn't just stick to kings and battles either. He dove right into the fabric of daily life. How did their governments work? What were the complexities of their social systems and family life? How did these profound religions evolve? And of course, the incredible art, literature, and science they produced. It was the whole shebang, a complete 360-degree view of a civilization.
A huge part of his work was just blowing past the stereotypes and showing the specific, tangible things that ancient India gave to the entire world.
Remember that old idea about India lacking in scientific progress? Yeah, not true. Basham laid out the pioneering work in mathematics. I'm talking about the decimal system and the concept of zero, plus sophisticated astronomy and a really detailed, practical knowledge of medicine. These were absolutely major intellectual achievements.
And it was the same story for culture. He explored the huge, profound body of Indian philosophy, its long and celebrated literary traditions, and the unique, influential styles of art that would go on to shape aesthetics all across Asia and beyond.
So, this book was published decades ago. Why do we still talk about it? Why does it still matter so much? Let's dig into its lasting legacy.
You know, one of the biggest reasons for its success is just the way he wrote it. He somehow managed to take thousands of years of really complex history and turn it into a story that was just a pleasure to read. It's not some dry, dusty academic textbook. It's a story you can get lost in. And that's why it became the go-to book for generations of students.
It's considered a classic for a reason. It gives you a truly complete understanding of this unbelievably rich heritage. And in doing so, it basically set a new standard for how to write about a civilization with the depth and the respect it actually deserves.
So here's the final takeaway. The Wonder That Was India did way more than just tell a story. It became a truly foundational text. It actively reshaped how the world understood ancient India, transforming it from a caricature of stereotypes into the dynamic, brilliant, and influential civilization it always was.
When you really think about it, what Basham did proves how a single, thoughtful re-examination can completely change how we see the past. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other histories, shaped by old, biased narratives, are out there just waiting for a second look?